Hello, I'm Babson Nexus, and this is a demonstration of StreamLink Manager for Channels, a specialized add-on that gives you the ability to manage and bookmark all of your streaming services and the shows that may be on them, the movies that may be on them in one simple, easy-to-use place completely effortlessly. Today, I'll be demonstrating how this is working using version 2024-08-281554 beta. If you're watching this at some future date, some of the functionality or visuals may have changed or been updated. Now, there are several different additions and ways to install StreamLink Manager. For instance, there's the Windows one where you actually just download a batch file and run that batch file with an installation command and it sets itself up. Similarly in Linux, there is a .shift file where you can do pretty much the same. There's also an option to manually build up the entire program using Python directly if you're familiar with that. That would give you the ability to do an installation on an unsupported operating system like Mac OS. But really, the recommended way to do the installation, and that would allow you to install this on any type of operating system, regardless of what's happening underneath, is to use Docker. And so that is what we are going to use today. Now, before we get underway, I want you to note that we are sitting in a directory, and you can see the Channels DVR folder. This isn't my real one. This is one I've created for this demonstration, but just so you know, it is here. It looks like a Channels folder. It's got the database images and logs directory, but keep this in mind for later because this is what we are going to be using. Now though, I want to move over to Docker. So you can see here that we're inside of Docker Desktop, a way to manage all of our Docker images and containers and everything around it. You can note here that I have already created an image for a StreamLink Manager, the one that's checked off down the bottom. Normally, when you're doing the installation, you shouldn't need to do this yourself. I just had to do it manually because I'm running a beta edition. Now, what we're also going to be using is Portainer. Portainer is an add-on for Docker. It's a program of its own, just the same way StreamLink Manager is a program within Docker that you're creating. And it gives you the ability to manage other Docker containers. It's a very powerful tool. I recommend going down this path. It's not your only option, but it is the way I would recommend going. So I am going to open up Portainer now. Make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. And you can see I have a local group. And we're going to go into stacks, which you can also see on the side here. Now, stacks are fairly similar to the idea of what you may have heard of as Docker Compose. They have the ability to put in some very easy, simple code lines that will do the entire build process for you. Now, this is not the only way to do this within Docker. You can use a Docker command line. That's not an issue. That's very much possible. You can go ahead, you can type Docker run, put it in, everything you want. It'll work just fine. This is a lot simpler, more straightforward. There's also the ability to use another add-on. You can see it here called Olive Tin. That's another tool that another creator has built for channels as well. There's a subcomponent of that called Project One-Click. What Project One-Click does is it basically does what we're about to do manually. It creates a stack and creates all the variables that you are going to need for that stack. So you can use that method. Very, very simple and straightforward, or we're just going to do it manually here for the time being because this isn't in Project One-Click yet at the time of this recording. So now knowing that, let's go ahead and add a stack. And when you add a stack, you must give it a name. And so I'm just going to call this SLM web stack. You can call it whatever you want. That makes your life easy. Next, I'm going to put in the code that is given for the stack right from the GitHub repo for both this and the Docker Compose. And so I'm just going to paste that in. The only difference you see is that this has SLM web. That's the image I was showing you before. Normally this would have a path to the GitHub repo so that it would actually pull the latest image or whatever image we go to. Which brings us actually to what you see next to this, a little squiggly and the word tag. These are variables. Some of these variables are required, some are optional. Tag, for instance, is optional. If you don't put in and create a variable, it will use the latest version. It's most likely you want the latest version, but there might be a reason you use a earlier, different version. Maybe there's some bit of code that isn't working for you. But I'm going to go ahead and put in that tag and put in latest. The next one down the list is the SLM port. So the way Stream Link Manager works is it creates a web-based front end. And that front end is accessed by going to a web page, port number. By default, that will be 5000 if you don't put anything in. In this case, we are going to put in 5001 because I want it to be somewhere different than default. Again, you don't have to put anything in. It'll just run under 5000. If you're running in Windows or Linux or Python, there's a method to set environmental variables to do this as well, very similarly, in which you may want to do even if you're using the default port of 5000, because you might need to open up the firewall, for instance, to access Stream Link Manager for Channels web page in a different machine. So something to keep in mind. The next variable is the channels folder. Now this is required, and this is very specialized for dealing with the Docker version. Dockers exist individually within themselves, like they're their own little specialized places that are completely cut off from the system that's underlying it. So if you want to access these systems, then you need to go ahead and actually put in where this is going to be. Now, I have a Windows machine underlying this, so just an important note as we go in here that these slashes must go in the opposite direction of normal. So you see I got C, and I got the slashes going the other way. That was the directory I was showing you before, temp channels DVR. Now, it should always be the top Channels DVR directory, not a folder within it. If you put a folder within it, you're going to mess things up because it needs to know specifically where things are. If you need another indicator, underneath this directory should be the imports directory. I intentionally didn't create it for now because you'll see it got created by the program. You could just put, say, something like the root directory, C drive if you're using Windows, / if you're just using Linux. You can use any of those, just so long as it can access the Channels DVR directory. Channels DVR directory could even be on another machine, so long as you've mapped it and made it available to the machine where Docker is on. So long as it can see that, then everything will be fine. The last item is the time zone, which again is not required, but if you don't, it's going to use universal time, which is probably not where you live. It could be, but probably against that. So in my case, this is going to be the Eastern time zone, so I will use America, New York. And this is what should be here. There's a link available right in the GitHub repo to tell you what value to use for that. So those are all the variables we need. We've got the actual stack ready to go. We've given it a name. Nothing else should be needed. We can go ahead and deploy the stack. And bam, stack successfully deployed. The stack exists now. Great. So what we're going to do next is I just want to show you what this actually created. First and foremost, this created a new container. You can see my SLM web stack here. That wasn't there before. And underneath it, the SLM container. You can see that it's mapped port 5001 to 5000. So that's how it knows what it's using. And the image we're using it against, SLM Web latest edition. And you can see all my other ones here, but that's where it is. The other really important thing created was if we go under volumes, you'll see I've got now this SLM web stack underscore SLM files. Volumes are protected data. So even if I delete my container for whatever reason, or I'm doing an upgrade, there are things in here that are really important. And I'm actually going to open this up. And you can see that there's a few CSV files, a log file, and a backup directory. These are the files. The program itself is basically a shell on top of it. It uses these files for everything it does. These are the things that must be protected. By creating a protected volume this way, it is being done. You'll see a directory, if you were to look, called program files. This is where they live. If you're using the Windows or Linux or Python version, underneath internal, you'll see a directory called program files as well. These are in there. They get protected during the upgrades. Just something to keep in mind. If you ever need to fix something or something goes wrong, this is everything. If you restore these, well, really just the 4 CSV files, the log file is incidental. But if you restore those 4 CSV files, everything will be back to how you were before. So now what we're going to do is switch over into the web. And I've just got a little web private browser going here. And we are going to go to that web page that we just created. So you can see I kind of just started to load it up, but localhost 5001. This would be whatever your port you want. You could use your machine name. That is also okay. You could use the IP address. And that's really important if you're on a different machine than where Docker is installed. You use the machine name or the IP address and make it available. So you can see here, we are actually in Stream Link Manager for Channels. And the version I mentioned before up in the corner, this is the home page. And we'll come back to this because there's a few things that are very interesting there. Now, what happened when I created that was there was a startup process. And during that initial startup process, those files that you saw were actually created. There was a bunch of checks to see what the machine name you're on was, where the channels folder is. It was doing a number of things. Now, it may take a couple of minutes the first time you start this up to get everything in place. Next time, if you ever need to restart this, it should just take a few seconds. But even if it did things incorrectly while looking around to get some of the settings in place, all of that can be fixed as we go through the settings process, which we will actually do now. I do, though, before we go to that, want to just pop over to the files area. So this is generally more an administrative function. You should generally not need to do that, but this relates to those exact same files that we were just looking at inside of the volume. So those are also visible from here. So you can export them, you can view them, you can replace them. We'll do some of that in a little bit. But I just want to note that these are the same files, and we'll get more into them in a bit. And especially we'll get into them as they become relevant. So I'm going to move over to the settings now. And we're going to skip a couple, but I'm going to jump down to the channels URL. So this should be the path to your actual channels installation. Now, by default, the system will use the name of the local machine it's on. In this case, because we created it in Docker, it's using the Docker container's name. So if I go to test this, I will get an error that says, hey, I didn't find channels there. You need to update. So I am going to go ahead and do that. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. You should probably put your normal Channels DVR path. So that might be DVR your computer name .local :8089. Maybe use a different port. If you're having any issues with it reading your machine names, you can also use host.docker.internal, assuming channels is installed also on the same machine. So I'm going to save this first. You don't have to save it first. You can test without saving, but I happen to know this is going to work. And you can say, great, responded as expected. Perfect. So now we know it's talking to channels. This is necessary for us to tell it to do certain things in channels. Later on, it's going to need to do updates inside of channels and also to pull things from channels. So these are very important elements, which is why I want to get to them first. It's the same thing with the channels folder right below it. Now, if you're running this on Windows, if you're running this on Linux, it tried to find the channels directory. If it didn't find it after a minute, I gave up and just used the directory it is in. Same situation here inside of Docker. In my case, it didn't find it due to probably some other things I have set up on my system. But you can see I have that literal channels folder. That's what we mapped with our variable before. If I pop into it, you can see right away that it had those directories I showed you, database, image, logs. It's the same directory that's sitting on my Windows machine, except now it's mapped inside the Docker. So I know this is the one I want. Easy peasy, select. If you need to go somewhere else, you can also kind of search around. So if I want to go to the root directory, for instance, I could do that, navigate to it, and I can see the directories that are available to me there and click into them and continue searching around. But I don't need to do that because I already found what I want. So I'm just going to reset that. And you can see my channels DVR remains set to this directory. So most important thing, because this is now going to be where we are going to create the stream links. It's going to use the imports directory, which you can see is not here right now. In my fake example, in your real example, it will always be there. So with those in place, we've got a couple of the most important things. The next step I want to go to is the search defaults. More than anything, though, is the country. So you can see here, this is set to United States, 2-digit code. There's a number of other countries underneath here. Now, that country code is set again during the initialization setup. It tries to figure out where you are. If it does it incorrectly, you can change it here. This country code determines what streaming services are available to you. So now, for instance, I'm going to go ahead and change this to Uganda, and I'm just going to also change my number of results to 3. This is the default number of results you see when you search. You can also change it when you search. We'll show that later. But I'm going to click Save. And it's going to take a second here because it is now updating the list of streaming services. And you can see this list got considerably shorter than what we had before. So this is what's available in this country. I'm going to switch it back to the United States. Save again. And once this finishes, now I've got that list back. It's got everything for those. And don't mind that I'm going so fast. We'll take a closer look in a minute. The other thing is the language code. Certain combinations of country and language are valid. Not everything is valid in every place. There is a link on the GitHub repo that will show you valid combinations, but again, that's not an exhaustive list. But chances are, if you're in a certain country, if you're in France, you're going to pick French. If you're in Spain, you're going to pick Spanish or España. So whatever makes the most sense for where you are, that's what you should choose. So now we've got that in place and we've got those, we can actually go ahead and select our streaming services. I am going to start off by just scrolling down and picking one. So I'm going to use things I have access to. So I'm going to pick Disney Plus. And I added Disney Plus, and by moving it left to right, I can move it back. If I don't want it anymore, that is fine as well. So this is how you're going to manage your streaming services. So if you change your streaming services, if you add them, if you remove them, if you want to change priority, which I'll show you in a second, this is where you will always do it. So Stream Link Manager for channels doesn't particularly care where a program, a movie, TV show is on. It's going to bookmark it regardless of where it is today. What it does do though is every time it runs its process, which we'll get to, it's going to go ahead and check to say, oh, okay, this program, this movie exists. Does it exist on a streaming service that you have subscribed to? Yes. Okay, which one in priority order? Top one? All right, that's the link I am going to use to put this into a file that can be read by channels to launch it. So as things move around, as you subscribe and unsubscribe to streaming services, it can handle all those changes. It does not care. By the way, as I'm going to go ahead and add some other streaming services now, I'm going to pick Hulu, Hoopla, and Canopy. They're nice and all close to each other, and you can see I selected multiple. Now, if you just click one, you're not getting anywhere. I'm going to hold down Control so I can select multiple, and I'm going to move them over to the side. This is also true with the priority. I can move up priority of one, or I can move up the priority of multiple at a time. So that's how you want to deal with things. And so I'm just going to get this in the order I want. Everything's great. I'm going to click Save. Update updates the list of streaming services. New ones are added. Some are removed all the time. You do not generally need to do that. It will do it itself during automatic processes that we will get to later. But if you're doing things manually, you can click that update and it will update the list of streaming services that are available to you. So now I've created my order of preference. And there's also a reason for this order that I will get to in just a moment as well. So one of the things that you see there is I picked Hulu over Disney Plus. Now you see down here in Advanced Experimental, we have a couple of other options. And one of them is convert Hulu to Disney Plus. Now Disney Plus has an area where it has the Hulu tile, if you will. And so Hulu programs are available in Disney Plus. My own personal testing tells me that this is true about 80, maybe 85% of the time. Not everything is there. And there are some distinct situations where it does not work. So we'll get into how you're going to deal with that later. But for now, I generally like to go with this and deal with the off situations when they arise. So I'm going to turn that on and save. So that's why I put Hulu's priority on top, because if something's on Hulu, I want the Hulu link version to then be changed to Disney Plus version directly. The other reason is because of how the data is stored on our source, which is a website called Just Watch. So in some situations, like Hulu or Paramount Plus, you will end up with a link that goes directly to an episode or directly to a movie and plays it. It works wonderfully. In the case of Disney Plus, though, it does not. It goes to the general landing page. Unfortunately, I have no control over that. It's coming from Just Watch. Streamlink Manager for Channels is a consumer of that data, so that is what actually gets put in when we generate these stream links. So there's situations like that where you want to deal with it. There are times where it works the other way. For instance, there's the links to Netflix where it gives it one way, and the only difference I need to do to make a movie work is switch one word in the link. And so Streamlink Manager for Channels actually does that in the code. There's something similar with Amazon Prime. So there's situations like that. If you have a situation where the link that's being provided can be modified systematically, that means simple replace. It says watch. If you change it to the word play, it will work better. If you have anything like that, submit a request and it will be added to the program. These are fairly straightforward replacements that we call cleaning the URL. So keep that in mind. Now, most of the major stuff, it's probably already taken care of, but there might be situations for something you have. So please let me know. So now that we've got that, the other experimental setting that I did not show you there was the running Prune function in channels. This is something to keep in mind if you have a lot of personal media, maybe on an external drive, because what the Prune function does is it says, hey, does the file still exist? If it does, great. If it doesn't, I'm going to delete it out of channels. So if you have any worries about Prune functions getting rid of stuff, you might want to turn this off. Problem being that if something moves from one streaming service to another that you don't have access to, or it just leaves being on any streaming service, this program is going to delete those files. So you need to prune them, otherwise they'll still live in channels as if they're still there. You'll click to launch them, it'll give you an error and fail. So generally I recommend keeping this on. You might want it off for some reason and only run prunes manually. So totally up to you. This is a question of how much involvement you want in the day-to-day. The default for most things is for you to have almost no involvement. This is designed to be simple and straightforward without you having to do anything. Except, actually bookmark programs and search for them. The one other item I haven't discussed here in the settings is the scheduler that is up here. We're going to come back to this because it's not going to make a lot of sense until we talk through all of the other elements. So just remember that for later. In the meantime, I'm going to back out here and go back to those files that we looked at before. And you can see that if I go to View Settings, those are all those things that we just set. There's that link to our channel's URL. There's our path to our channel's folder. There's our country, language code, the number of results, etc. These all live in here. There's always the possibility there may be more settings at the time you're looking for this. They'll just be a continual list. So that's why this file is important, because it is going to save everything you are doing. It's the same with, say, the streaming services. Let's go ahead and pop on over to that. Let's do streaming services. So you can see the list of streaming services here. I'm just going to fast scroll down to where we had some. So you can see Hulu, set to true. priority 1, Hoopla at 4, Canopy at 3. So you can see everything that we just set in that front end is saved in these files. So these files are, again, the entire back end. You protect them, everything will always be able to come back from any type of disaster so long as they are backed up somewhere. Now, I did want to take a particular look at the streaming services, and I'm going to go ahead and export this this file. Before I do so, I'm just going to change the view. So I'm going to drop you guys off and back in the temp directory. So I'm clicking the export button and it's asking, do you want to save this file or open it? I'm just going to save it in the temp directory. So now you should see it. It has appeared. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to edit this file really fast inside of TextPad. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just changing A&E to be called Z delete me. And we're going to save it and close out. So why I'm doing this is I'm going to demonstrate how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that file. All right. So now let's switch you guys back into the view that we're seeing here. So it's giving you the blank. There we go. All right, so you can see that I've gone ahead and reselected that file that I just edited. So I'm going to click replace. And now if we view, you can see I've got a streaming service name says Z delete me. So that is obviously a fake one. What I'm going to do now is switch over to the run processes. We're going to go through a lot of these, but one of the ones you can see here is update streaming services. This is very similar to that update button we saw in settings. Actually, it does the exact same thing. In this area is a lot of different steps in the end-to-end that runs all of them. We're going to get more into that detail as we go along. But for now, I'm just going to update streaming services. You saw for a moment, I got a little pop-up that said, hey, hold on while this is running. If things took a while, you would see things in this live process log below. We'll actually see some of that. But if we go back over to our files, if we go back home, you can actually see that it added the streaming service A&E and it removed the streaming service Z delete me. That is what we see here in the notifications area. So the notifications area gives you little subsets of information that are fairly important. You can also, by the way, see all those removes and adds from when we switched from Uganda back to the United States, back and forth. You'll also see some other notifications here at home. Things like when a new episode is added, and we'll demonstrate a few of those a little bit later. But so yeah, whatever you want to go here, if you want to see things are changing, you'll get some nice notifications of some big events. By the way, as well, if we go over to logs, you can actually get a lot more detail about what just happened if you're looking for some more detailed information. But here you can see that that added and removed line that we saw in the notifications, that's where they came from. But there's a lot of other information around it as far as what was happening. So if there's ever any reason to need to troubleshooting, there's the log info here as well. But again, more higher level administrative functions. If you don't want to do them, don't worry about them. So now let's go ahead and, oh yes, by the way, I should just show you this real quick. Go back over the settings. You can see that's A&E again. I go over the files. We look at streaming services. A&E is sitting down at the bottom because it's the most recent ad. it'll reset itself back to alphabetical at the top next time I click save on services. It doesn't really matter what order this is in. It is just there. So really, we have everything we need now. All our settings are correct. We've set up our streaming services. Most of those settings you're never going to touch. Maybe the streaming services, which is why it's on top. You noticed I was saving things and scrolling down a lot. Don't worry about it because most of the time, once you set those, they're done. There's nothing else to do to them. It's really just managing your streaming services. So now we have everything we need in order to add a program. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go over to add a program. You can see we have search options up top here. And you can do your country code, you can do your language code, and you can do the number of results. You can change these literally on the fly. I'm going to keep them my defaults. But number of results is the one you probably would change the most. Sometimes when you search for something, it's not the top result. Most of the time it is, but the more obscure the title or the more close to other titles that are popular, the more difficult it is. So you might need to go to 9, you might need to go to 25, you might need to go to 99. I've done it usually to 100. After that, if it can't find it, it's usually not there. So if you can't find it when you're searching, chances are it doesn't exist. You can put in a request to Just Watch to add it. Again, this is a consumer of Just Watch data. This data does not exist in the program. It is searching another website's information. So if it's not here, you can request to them to put it in. Same thing with streaming services. If your streaming services are missing, there's actually a form to fill out to request that. That is all linked in the GitHub repo. Please follow that. We're going to stick to search for a bit. I'm going to hold off on telling you about manually, but now we can search for what we want. I'm going to search for Zootopia, and we are going to click search, and you can see Zootopia the movie, Zootopia plus the show, and Zootopia 2 came up. I got 3 results. If I cancel for a sec, and I'll say I just put up 9 results, and we search for Zootopia. And by the way, you notice casing and things don't matter. You can see a lot of other results showed up. I am going to again cancel out of that, and you can see when I canceled, everything returned back to its defaults. So let's do Zootopia search and go with Zootopia movie. And tells me, hey, you've selected Zootopia 2016, the movie, with this ID. This is how it's keeping track of it, and that's for informational purposes. Also notice search and add manual and cancel have now been grayed out. You need to finish this process either by clicking done or generate stream links. If you click done, you don't generate a stream link right now. That's fine. It will catch it the next time you run the full process. It depends upon what you're doing if you want to generate that at this moment. You also notice here you have the option to Streamlink override a movie. So this is required for manual things, but we'll get to that in a minute. But maybe for whatever reason, the way Streamlink generates, you aren't going to like it. You're going to want to put something here. So you could actually put in your own direct link. I would say 99% of the time, this isn't going to come up, but I'll show some situations where it will. But don't worry if you don't do this. You can see off to the side here, we have modify programs. That is where we can also make these same edits again. But I'm going to go ahead and generate stream links. You saw that process button came up again. If things were happening, you would have seen things in the live log. This is a very quick process because there's only one thing to do. But it said, hey, congratulations, you finished this. But just because you generate the stream link doesn't mean it shows up in channels. And we will get into this run updates in channels later. But please keep that in mind. So we did that. Now let's say I go and search for Zootopia and I forget. Did I already do this? I don't know. I'm going to try it again. it won't let me. It'll say, hey, you've already bookmarked this. This thing already exists. So you don't need to worry about that. And even if it's been watched, which is a description we'll get to later, even if it's been watched, that you still generally probably want to leave it behind because that way you won't accidentally bookmark things again. Now, let's once again search for Zootopia. And let's say I clicked on Zootopia 2, which isn't even out yet at the time of this recording. And it's like, oh wait, no, I didn't mean to add it. Oh, how do I get away from here? And I click this and it says, hey, no, you need to stay here and finish this because this is being created. Like, oh, I don't want this. What do I do? So I'm just going to click done for now. Now remember that we accidentally added Zootopia 2, and we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Now another thing, obviously, is those are movies. Now let's do a show. Let's do something with a lot of episodes like Paw Patrol. And I'm going to search for Paw Patrol, and we can click that. And you can see it's taking a few seconds to think there, because it has to go ahead and find this massive list of episodes. Paw Patrol has quite a bit. But I did want to show you that a lot of the same things are here. You got that same done and generate stream links. You get the live process log down the bottom. But you obviously notice that we now have all the episodes. And if we want to say something is already watched, we can mark it as so. By default, everything is unwatched. That's what this means. This is saying, hey, this is unwatched, it's ready for me. If I want everything watched, so say I only want new episodes, I can mark all episodes as watched. Now every episode is unchecked. But maybe, I don't know, I didn't actually see season 1. I can check season 1. And only season 1 is now checked off. You notice you all went back to this again. If anything is even partial underneath something, it will go ahead and leave it available for check so you can do a full check and uncheck. But as I'm going, as you can see that when I had everything unchecked, then it went backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave everything except for the first few episodes. And say, I watched those 3. I don't need to see them again. Again, you have the ability to a stream link override. You also have the ability to put in an episode prefix. I'm going to get back to this in a moment, but keep this in mind for how this works. So at the end of the day, these are creating files that Channels actually picks up. So this is a function of how those files, this is the content of those files, the stream link override or the stream link defaults. The episode prefix is part of that file name. So, all right, we got a whole bunch of episodes. I am going ahead and just say done. And great, we finished adding. Now it has all of Paw Patrol in there. So now let's turn to manual options. So I'm going to go ahead and create manual program the movie. You can see I've done these tests before a few times. But let's say I try to go ahead and say, all right, I search for it. It doesn't exist. All right, I want to add this manually. I just can't find it anywhere, but I know the links. I know what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and try to click add manual. It's going to say, hey, you got to put in a release here. You need information under these manual options. So let's do that again. Oops. We'll go with manual program the movie. And I'm going to give this one a 2022 add manual. And just like when we search for a movie, we get the exact same things. Except now I definitely need to put in a link because actually we should make you an S. Because without this, there's no stream link to create. The program can't search for something that's manual. You created it. There's nothing for it to search. So you need to make sure you have a link for this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and say done. Now let's do the same for the show. And I'm going to say the show came out in 2023, the year after the movie. And we're going to add manual. This gives us a little bit different step. So it's saying, hey, what's your last season number? So I'm going to go ahead and say 2. You could have typed that. I'm just using the arrows on the side. And say there are 3 episodes in season 1. And before I do anything, notice that the next is grayed out. I can't do anything until I fill in this information. So I am going ahead and do that. And as soon as I did that, notice if I get rid of that, can't do it. As soon as I added an episode number, let's say it was 4 episodes in season 2. Now I can click next. And now it looks exactly the same. There is the same functionality of saying the episodes are watched and unwatched. And in this case, I actually do want to put in a prefix just so you can see what that looks like. So we're just going to put in the word big prefix. So when the program here creates the files, it creates something that says S01 E01 dot streamlink. And in this case, it's going to have a prefix before that. You might need to do this for some programs, especially if they're available in both a subtitled or dubbed format for non-domestic content. This comes up a lot actually with Hulu and Disney Plus stuff, where the links that are provided usually end up being the subtitled ones. So if you want the dubbed ones, you have to override those links, and I like to put in dub so I know which ones I'm getting. Sometimes it's a mix, like there's one season where it has the dubbed and the subbed available, so I will override the links to get the dubbed, but in the second season it's only subtitled, so I will put in the code prefix for sub and I won't put in any overrides. So just something to keep in mind. Since this is a manual program, again, I need to put in tests. I need to put in links for this as well. And we are going to go ahead and do that. Whatever the real links are. So give me, oops, that should say 1. This should be 2. Give me just a sec to put all these in. And done. So say done. And now those are all created. So now I've created a movie, a show, and I've also created a manual movie and a manual show. And there's no limit to this. You can have any amount of movies, shows, manuals, whatever you want. You could bookmark whether something's on your services or not, as I mentioned before. It doesn't matter. You can put anything in here. You can use it to keep track of everything under the sun. Just the more things you have, the longer some of the stuff's going to take to process. But now let's go ahead and go over to modify programs. So that was adding them. Now we can modify them, and you can see the list of things that we just did. The movie of the manual program, the show, Paw Patrol, Zootopia, and Zootopia 2 are all there. So if you recall, let's actually do Zootopia. If I go ahead and edit this, you can see the current stream link. If you remember what we did before, we generated a stream link. So it came up with a stream link. So it ran this process and got the actual stream link. So this will actually work when we create the files. And again, you could override it here if you need to. You could also update the title if you wanted, or the release year. This doesn't impact anything except what the file names are going to be and how Channels reads it. So for whatever reason, something's not quite right, you can manually override it, or it doesn't look the way you like. Just something to keep in mind. I am not changing anything, so I am just going to finish. If you do change something, click save first, then finish. If you don't change anything, I'm just clicking finish/cancel. You also notice before I do that the buttons on top here are grayed out. So you can't edit a different show while this is going on. So that's a few things you can do there. Now let's take a look at Paw Patrol. That was another big one. You can see the episodes that I marked as watched are still marked as unwatched, and you'll notice there's no stream links because I did not generate any stream links. So that is all blank. And again, everything we saw before, the stream link overrides, the episode prefixes, that's all stuff you can do here. So we're going to move on to another one for now. So let's get all the way down the bottom. And I'm going to show you this other stuff in just a moment, but let's cancel out of that. And if you remember correctly, we also added Zootopia 2, but we didn't mean to. That was an accident. So now I can go ahead and delete Zootopia 2, and it's gone. So now you can see my list. It's like it was never here. This is why I don't recommend deleting things that you've watched, because you could accidentally bookmark them again, and it's going to think, oh, now it's unwatched again. So I recommend leaving things behind. There is no real processing loss to having something that's already watched. It won't try to find stream links for it if it is watched. So you can see that that was deleted. Perfect. Now we don't have to worry about that. Now let's pop over to that show we created, the manual program. And one of the things we can do is we could add additional episodes. So let's say I want to add season 2, episode 5. It wasn't available to me before. So I can go ahead and do that. I'm just going to copy this link because, again, I must have a link for manual programs. And add episode. There we go. It's now part of the list. We can save and finish. Actually, don't need to click save there. It actually added it already, but I just like to do that as a habit, and we can click finish. But before I do, I just want to show, if I try to add, say, season 1, episode 3, and I try to add that episode, it says, hey, that already exists. Try again. You cannot add something that's already there. So just a safety measure to remember. You also notice we have the delete buttons on the side. And that also comes up in many different ways. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Generally, you would only do it for manual programs like these because regular programs are going to find those episodes. And I'm going to show you that in just a little bit. So for now, we're just going to finish cancel. And that's how you manage these programs as you move along. So now I'm going to go over to the Run Processes area. And so this is where we were before when we updated the streaming services. So now we're going to do something a little different. We're going to start close to the end and run the generate stream links. And this is going to take a little bit because we have Paw Patrol with its many, many episodes. You can see that happening down below as it's jumping around in the live process log. It's going through all those episodes one by one and trying to find a valid stream link based upon my streaming services. So this is a good opportunity to talk about all of these processes while this is running. So end-to-end process does a number of steps. It does a backup, so those files that we saw before for all the information and all the other backup files, it'll do 10 backups. It'll update the list of streaming services like we did manually. It will get new episodes, so for every show here, it'll go looking for every individual episode and see if the list versus the list that's already inside of Stream Link Manager, and if it has a new one, it'll show you, and we'll actually do that in a little bit. It'll import updates from channels. So when you delete a movie or episode in channels, eventually that file gets purged from the system, from the trash. When that happens, that's an update that gets imported. It'll get imported to Stream Link Manager, and it'll mark that movie or episode as watched, and we'll also do that as well. it'll do the generate stream links, and it will create all the files necessary. And then finally, it will run updates in channels. So what we just did now was generate the stream links. So we created the links in all the files, but in order for those files to appear in channels, there needs to be an update. It needs to scan for them, and we'll do that as well in a little bit. But while I was going on there, that finished off, and you saw everything got nice and bright, and I can now get away from that for a little bit. So we talked about the links themselves. So now I'm going to go show you something inside of here. So those files. So we have the bookmarks, which are all those shows that we bookmarked in the order we bookmarked them. So you can see Zootopia, Paw Patrol, the manual program. The Zootopia 2 is gone because we deleted it. You can see a little prefix on the manual ones. That's SLM. That's how we know that they're manual, and they will not generate their own links. And then we can look at bookmark statuses. You see these entry IDs. That is the same entry ID we see in bookmark statuses. So you can see Zootopia has a stream link. All those episodes of Paw Patrol do not, because I don't have a service that can handle it. And all these manual programs also don't get stream links because they do not have anything to search, but they do have the stream link override. So because of that, a file got created, and here we can see that literal file. It went in the channels folder, imports, movies, SLM. Same thing with the shows, imports, TV, SLM, the show name, the season, and then the title. So I want to show you that there, just so you get an idea of where it's going. You generally don't need to worry about that. Instead, let's pop back over into File Explorer, and we'll go into our Channels DVR directory now. And you can see now we have an imports directory. And just like I was saying before, movies and TV shows. We go to movies. It has a subdirectory called SLM. That's how we know what we're dealing with. And we can see the files that were created. Manual program, the movie, you'll notice without its colon, because that's a special character, it won't appear. And Zootopia. And you can see they're all about 1 kilobyte because they have that link inside that we were showing for the stream links. If we go back up into TV shows, we go SLM, we have manual program the show. It's the only shows here. We'd have more shows if we did not have that. It's 2 seasons. And you can see right away I had that prefix. So this is where we're talking about the file name. And otherwise we have the rest of the episodes, again, with their size and that ability. So that's it. That's how this actually creates things. So now it needs to be scanned into channels in order for it to appear. But we're going to go a little backwards first. So since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one episode of the manual program. And this is what would happen with channels. When your trash empties, these files physically get deleted. And so let's switch back to where we were before. And we're going to go back into run processes. And we can now import updates from channels. So we're literally going backwards from the way the process would run normally. But let's go ahead and do that. As you saw briefly, something popped up telling us that there was a change of some kind. So let's go ahead and go over back to our home area. And in our home area, you can see that, hey, we removed this file because this file is now gone. So what did that do inside of here? Well, if we go ahead and we modify our program and we go to the show and we edit it, you can now see that Season 1, Episode 3 is now marked as watched, which means it will not recreate the file. If I want the file, I can mark it as unwatched, and then the file will come back with its links if it is valid. That is how it works. So actually, we're going to do that. So I'm going to mark you as unwatched, save, and I'm going to finish, and then I'm going to go back to the show and I'm going to click this generate stream links. Just like when we were adding the program, this is going to generate stream links into that process. So now, if we go back to Explorer where we just were, oops. If we go back to Explorer, you can see that Season 1, Episode 3 is now back because I regenerated those stream links by marking that unwatched. Otherwise, if I had left it watched, it would not come back. This is how it's managing the files and what is in channel. So it'll add stuff, it'll delete stuff, it'll delete whole directories when they're empty. So if you finish watching a show or it becomes unavailable to you, it will delete the seasons, it'll delete the episodes, it'll delete the movies. It'll take care of itself as it goes. So that is how it does that. Like I mentioned before too, there's also the idea of new episodes come up, right? I mean, there's a lot of shows that are in progress. So let me bring you back into our Streamlink Manager here. And let's go back to, we're already in Modify Programs. Let's go ahead and actually edit Paw Patrol. And I'm going to delete this first episode. By the way, before I do that, did you notice that it's 3 digits for the episodes here in Season 1, and it's 2 digits for the episodes in Season 2? This is a function of the program. If there's 3-digit episodes, all episodes will be 3 digits, and same thing with seasons. If it's 2, it's 2. If it's 1, it's still going to be 2. 2 digits is the minimum. This just helps with sorting the files and being able to see everything very easily. So let's go ahead and delete this episode. And now I'm going to go over to run. Oops, I tried to do something bad. I tried not to save and it stopped me. So let's go ahead and save. That was totally intentional. You can believe it. And finish. So now that I made that change, everything is in place for that. So let's go back to run processes. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on Get New Episodes. And you can see it's running. And again, this would all happen normally if you ran this in the end-to-end or you did it automated, which we will get to in a moment. But I'm going to jump back to the notifications. And now you can see I got a notification that says, hey, for Paw Patrol, I added Season 1, Episode 001. That same episode we deleted. You delete an episode, if it's something that's real, it'll just come back. More so if we go into Modify Programs here, and I go to Paw Patrol again, you'll now notice it came back unwatched, because as far as Streamlink Manager for Channels is concerned, this is a net new episode. So new episodes are unwatched unless you watch them. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's watched, and save, and finish. So I get you back to where I want you. So that's how we deal with that. So then lastly, there is just updating the media in channels. So let's go back into our run process, and you see you have the run updates and channels button. And I am going to click that, and I'm going to pop over into my channels here, and you just notice it started scanning. And that's because this is what this process truly does. It sets off several steps. That prune we talked about before, where it's going to delete content, a scan where it's looking for new content, and finally a reprocess. So let's say you have a movie and it moves from Canopy to Hoopla. Well, you're still going to have the Streamlink file. So as far as channels is concerned, nothing's changed, but something has changed, and that's the contents of the file. So when that happens, we need to reprocess it to make sure we get the right links and make sure everything is up to date. So just a little something it does in the background that you don't need to worry about, but those are some of the steps that happen along the way. Other than that, those are all the steps. And so you could do it manually like I've been doing this entire time. You could say, hey, I don't want to do this automatically. I want everything to happen by my complete control. I do not recommend that, though. So that's why if we go back to settings, the last setting was the scheduler. And here's where we can turn on the end-to-end process. It is not on by default. It means that you have to turn it on to make it happen. And you set a time for this to run. So I'm going to set this for 2:45 in the morning and click save. And now it'll run at 2:45 in the morning. If you remember earlier, we set our time zone. If you did not set that and you're on universal time still, you need to keep that in mind that this is off from whatever your system is. By the way, if you have a 24-hour clock, this shouldn't do AM or PM. This should show you the 24-hour time. This is all part of system settings. So that is something that you might notice as well in your individual area. Now, the reason I like to run this in the middle of the night, for me, is because it can take a long time. You saw what it was doing when we were just, running through Paw Patrol. It takes a quarter of a second to half a second to run through every single episode in movie that's unwatched, that's not a manual one, to search for a stream link for it. So I have about 20,000 episodes in my example right now, in my real one that I'm running on here. And that takes less than 2 hours at the moment. Some days it runs in like 45 minutes or even faster. It's really unclear why that is, why some days are faster than others, but that it does, and it runs correctly and everything seems to be fine. But I generally lean towards the worst case scenario side, which means leave time for it. So that's why I like to have it run in the middle of the night. Again, you don't have to run an end process. You can go straight to run processes and kick it off manually. Even if you make a bunch of changes and you just want to do that, you can still run it manually. The next scheduled time will still run. Those are all completely controlled by you. So that is really it. That is everything in Stream Link Manager for channels. Our only last stop is the About area. Here you can see what is in all the most recent versions. You can find out what's been updated and what's been changed. You should keep yourself up to date. Inside the GitHub repo, I describe how to set up a watch. Make sure you sign up for a GitHub account, do a watch, get updates. When updates are available, run the update processes exactly as described in the instructions that are in the repo. That has everything you'll ever need. It goes in even more detail than what we have gone through here. But you could see as well what's been updated in every one of those versions. going all the way back to the original prototype in April 1st of 2024 through the deployment of this. Obviously, what you're seeing is going to be different because for you to be running this, you will have to have had the full launch production version, which will be coming out soon after this has been recorded and released. And then here as well, I do want to point out the various tools. We've talked about JustWatch a lot. They are the backend data for everything we're using. Their system is very important to what we do. And a lot of other tools that were used to make this happen. More so, this has been done just by me. I've built this from scratch. I've figured out how to do everything. I'm maintaining this. It's a one-person job. I did this because I wanted to do it for myself. This is a tool that I wanted in Channels. So, and I know it's a tool that other people would find useful. So I wanted to get it working. So this is a very important thing that I use for myself that I wanted to give to the rest of the community. That also makes many other wonderful tools. We talked about Project One-Click. There's all sorts of other Dockers for getting access to Pluto and to Samsung TV Plus and to Plex. There's so many wonderful tools and add-ons that the community does. I recommend all of them. Because I did this for myself, I do not expect any type of payment on this. If you wish to, I did leave a tip pool here, and it is available for you on PayPal. Just follow the links that are here or on the GitHub repo and anything like that. I truly appreciate it. Whether you do or not makes no difference because, like I said, this is a tool that I wanted. And so this is something that's making my Channels DVR experience better as well. So thank you very much. I hope you find this very useful. And as like I said, if you have other additional feedback, need additional help, you can click on the help and resources. That will bring you directly to the community pool. You can make requests on the GitHub repo at any time directly as well, especially for things that deal with ways to make the links better, that make them more useful for you. So please stay up to date. Please contribute to the community. And that is all. So again, thank you and goodbye.